This podcast is brought to you by Bernie's Tap and Grill. It's family owned and operated since 1954. Located across from Wrigley Field on Clark and Waveland. My dad hit a few home runs on the Waveland Avenue, and Bernie's was my dad's favorite place to go. It's got delicious food, 4 full-service bars, an awesome beer garden, a sidewalk patio cafe, and a cool upstairs area. It's the place I've always met my friends at before and after games. Go on by and tell Linda Dillman Jeff Santo sent you. Bernie's Tap and Grill, where you go when you go to Wrigley.
Sit back and relax. It's time for peanuts, popcorn, and Cracker Jacks.
Hey, how's it going? I'm your host, Jeff Santo. I'm here with my wife, Christy.
Hello, hello.
You know, I want to talk about the utility player in baseball and the character actor in Hollywood in the movies.
Okay.
They're similar. You know, and we talked to Pete Lecoq, which he was kind of a platoon guy, but sometimes you really remember these utility guys. And we got a crackerjack call today with a real utility guy, Carmen Fanzone. And I remember Carmen played with my dad, and then Paul Popovich was another big utility guy that would fill in. If someone's hurt, he's in that position, and they're playing it. So it's almost like they could be lead guys.
They could be.
Right? I mean, it depends who's in front of them. Like who's playing that part at third base. Because Carmen was a third baseman. And his story is very interesting because he was down in the minors for 8 seasons. 7 with Boston, 1 with the Cubs. And he had phenomenal numbers. And he just never got that shot. And when he did get the shot, he waited 8 years. And then my dad got hurt one season. He filled in. And I remember my mom saying, my dad was a little worried.
Right.
And that would have never happened. But it just shows you that a guy can fill in like that because he's good enough to play.
And all you need is that moment.
You need that moment, right? And with character actors, you look around, you see some guys like James Gandolfini. He was a character actor that we saw in movies. We really didn't know his name, right? He was in True Romance. He was
That's right.
He was a killer in that part, and what a scene that was. But then he gets the role of Tony Soprano in The Sopranos, and he's a lead guy because he had it in him, right?
For sure.
And so there's a lot of that going on, and sometimes it's just whether you get that opportunity or not. And so we got Mark DeCarlo Part 2, which is fascinating, and can't wait for you to hear my crackerjack call. Stick around because it's going to be a good one.
And there's a great story in there I can't wait for you to ask him about.
Oh, yeah. It has to do with music, and it's mind-blowing. So just stick around for that.
Mm-hmm.
And also, it warms our hearts when we get emails to us personally about what we're doing. And we got one that you're going to read, right?
Yes. This is from Anne-Marie Piscule, and she wrote, "Loved Ron Santo since 1960. I was one of the youngsters who would meet his car in the gravel parking lot, get an autograph, and walk with him to the clubhouse entrance. I sent him a fan letter that winter. He replied with photos of himself. When the mail arrived, I screamed so loud, the neighbor across the street came over to see if I was all right. She thought someone had broken in and murdered me. I was 13 years old and home alone. He has remained my favorite Cub all these years. My end plan is to be cremated and have my family secretly pour my ashes under his flag in left field. Thank you for these podcasts and an inner look at what it was like to be his son."
Oh, wow. That was great.
That was really great.
All right. Here's part 2 of Mark DeCarlo.
Enjoy.
Gino's East of Chicago, doing deep dish in Chicago since 1966. Now has an LA location. Same great recipes, same great ingredients. That's no joke. Their deep dish tastes exactly the same as it does in Chicago. It's my favorite. I love the deep dish. And Gino's East is where I go when I want a taste from home. Named Best Pizza in LA by LA Times readers, and I certainly agree. Plus, there's a full menu of Italian favorites, Chicago Tavern-style pizza, and the Italian beef sandwich. Dine in for great food straight from the oven, or do carryout or delivery. For great pizza and great atmosphere, go to 12924 Riverside Drive in Sherman Oaks, near the corner of Riverside and Coldwater Canyon, just off the 101 and Coldwater Canyon exit. Or order online. Go to genoseast.com. Well, getting back to what do you think of the strike and everything going on here in Hollywood?
I think it's essential.
Yep.
There's a lot of money in entertainment, and it's not being spread around equitably. And the Directors Guild got a really good deal. You know, they increased foreign residuals 70%.
Yep.
It used to be back in the day, if you got a sitcom on the air for 3 years, you were set for life. I have a friend of mine who was a recurring on a network sitcom. He had to move back to Iowa because he wasn't making enough money.
Oh man, that's amazing. I know. Yeah.
And they just put studs on some streaming service, and I get nothing, literally nothing for a year, and then maybe you get something. But someone's making money off of that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Someone's making money off of all these streaming services. I don't know, but I think the strike is essential. I've been picketing Warner Brothers with our new puppy, and people are energized. I just feel like no one is, the producers are not in a hurry to settle it. I think they're trying to just grind people down. Why do you think it is that they gave it to the Directors Guild and not the writers right now? I don't know. Maybe the Directors Guild had a tighter set of demands. You can probably get away with non-union writers, but you probably can't. If you make a mistake with a director and you hire a scab director or a bad director, it's gonna cost you a lot more money in the mistakes, right? Maybe that. I think it's probably a smaller guild too, right? Well, a little bit, yeah, and maybe because of commercial directing too, a little different, So and even TV's different than the features, but yeah, man. Do you see the future being bright once we're past this point? Kind of transferring into the streaming element of everything. I don't know. I was talking about this with a friend of mine last night at dinner, and show business is just not as much fun as it used to be. Mm-hmm. It used to be, and that may be, because I was 20 and everything was fun. Right. But it's not as silly or as fun anymore. And I think as things consolidate more, the middle class actor, how do you make a living? Yeah, I know. People, you get paid X amount of money to work on a show, then you're supposed to get residuals and stuff like that. And that usually keeps you afloat for the year. But if you're not getting residuals because streamers really don't pay anything, where's the, back in the 70s and 80s, you'd see these character actors pop up on every show on television in a different role. And, they would work 10 or 15 shows in a year and do good work. And there was a whole class of actors like that. And I just don't see the financial structure existing to support that lifestyle currently, and maybe in the future. I don't know. Yeah, and I compare it to, like, we don't see the big movie star anymore come out like it used to. And you're talking about character actors too. They become movie stars too in their own way. And I feel that in baseball too. I mean, it's really hard to get that guy. You had a lot of Hall of Famers in the 60s, right? Playing on those all-star teams. You don't see that much anymore. The consistency. And maybe it's because, there's so many people playing it, so many people trying to get there. The money's so big that, is it the money that is doing it to everyone? Because it almost seems like the system itself is a box. And if you don't fit, you're having a hard time with it. Well, I think it comes down to, what's the motivation of the owners? If the motivation of the owners is to fill the seats and make a lot of money on TV, maybe the best way to do that is to have a Mike Trout and a Shohei Ohtani on your team, and everyone else sucks, right? And you're going to make your money. I think for a long time, the people that own the Cubs realized, we don't have to have a good team. We have a beautiful park. And as long as we have a Sammy Sosa or an Alfonso Soriano or a Damon Berryhill, someone to bring people in, you're going to go. I mean, we've lived through some horrific Cubs teams. Of course. I never stopped going, right? I mean, now when I go, I plan my trips to Chicago. The first thing I look at is, are they home or away? And if they're away, I don't go. Right. I don't see that changing, but I don't know. If your goal is to win the World Series, I think maybe you approach your payroll differently.
Yeah, I think so too. You look at Moneyball, right? And we love that movie because you're cheering for the underdog. You're cheering for the team that isn't overpaid. And yet that only took it so far, right? They never got to the big dance and won it. So, but I do think today, man, I do think analytics did hurt the game in a lot of ways. And now we're kind of trying to bring it back, but you don't find many Mike Trouts now. You really don't. And you don't find a guy that consistently for 10 years puts up the same numbers. And maybe, there's more strikeouts, there's less walks, there's all less small ball. And it just feels like you don't get, and maybe it's starting in the travel leagues all the way to college and whatnot, but not having those players. I mean, back in my dad's day, these guys were in the bigs at 20, right? Now you're getting guys like Matt Mervis he's 25. That's kind of old back then, getting like, you may be a full-time minor leaguer. Nothing against Matt. He's got a good, but 25, now you got to get a couple years to get ready in the leagues. You're 28, 29. You're not getting 10 years.
No.
No.
Well, and I think you bring up a good point with this analytics. I think as analytics is to baseball, AI is to entertainment, right? The computer is always going to figure out ways to do things that supplant human sweat in some way. And it doesn't necessarily make it the final product better. It makes it more profitable for the owners.
Yeah, man.
Right.
Yep.
If you can say, write me a movie like Star Wars AI, and then have some writer take whatever comes out and buff it up a little bit and make it a little bit better, that's going to be less expensive than paying a big time writer to write a movie like Star Wars.
Yeah.
And I remember when YouTube first came out, I thought it was ridiculous because the audio was bad, the camera was shaky, the production value was crap. I thought no one will ever watch this. But people did, and people do. And now I think the bar for what constitutes professional video has been so degraded, which when one way it's a bad thing and another way it's a good thing. It's democratized production, and some kid with an iPhone and a funny idea can make a funny video, which was not the case 20 years ago, right? But the lush, beautifully photographed Dolby kind of production, it seems to be a smaller and smaller and smaller piece of the pie every year.
Yeah, less quality. Yeah. And you find it like, do you think it's harder to, like, if you were coming up today, would you find it harder today than the time that you made the trek?
I don't know. I mean, in one way, it would be easier because we could make our own stuff. My improv group, the Frayed Knots, we decided we were going to make videos. This is back in the 80s. And we had a big VHS deck, and the cutting, it was impossible to edit. It was hard to do everything. And now you can do it on your phone, with the editing on your phone, and you can make a professional looking video in 4K in 20 minutes and put it out. So if you have a great idea and you can photograph it and shoot it, that works. So in one way, that's great. I do, you mentioned I do Hugh Neutron, and I do a lot of cartoons. There's a whole world of people on the internet, these kids that are doing their own animation. I met this guy named Uncle Al who does impressions of famous cartoon characters, does beautiful animation, and makes these really funny, weird, great videos. And he gets millions of hits on them, millions. And he's talking to me like, man, I just want to come to Hollywood and work for Nickelodeon. I'm like, dude, a hit show on Nickelodeon gets 150,000 fans. You've times 10, you have that already, so there's still the cachet of being on TV, but I think the center of creativity has absolutely moved to digital and moved to the internet.
It's shifted,
which is cool. We're going to start a new cartoon show on Spotify, a new video podcast with Boffo the Bear on Spotify instead of doing it on TV, because that's where the people are.
Yeah. Now let's talk about your lovely wife, Yenny. She is a successful actor and voiceover actor.
Yes, she is.
And you guys do a lot of work together, which I love. Talk about, what you guys got going on.
Well, Yenny escaped from Cuba when she was 10. She went to Miami. She graduated college there and then decided she wanted to come to Hollywood and be a famous actress, like every person in America. She comes to LA. On her first audition, she books the lead in a sitcom, and it was a big, huge Telemundo sitcom called Los Beltran. She did that for a couple of years.
Awesome.
And now she's like a big voiceover actress, which is great because the voiceover stuff we do, we can do it from anywhere. We have a travel podcast called A Fork on the Road, and we're starting that up again in July. And we're going to Europe, and we bring our, like your setup that you have there, we bring our microphones and our stuff there, and we can do our work from any hotel room in the world. So it's a really great lifestyle. She's very clever and talented, and I'm punching way over my weight.
Come on. You guys are great together, man. That's awesome. But that's what you have to do today, man. You got to get that partnership going. And because the lifestyle is that, it's kind of more, you got to find your niche.
Yeah. And I think we have, and it's we have a lot of great friends, and we're able to kind of do what we want to do, which really that's the point of life, right?
Yeah, totally, man. Now, out of all the stuff, creative parts that you have mastered, what's the one that fills the soul the most for you?
I like improvising. I think this animation stuff I've been doing lately is really the best stuff. We've created this character called Boffo the Bear, and my partner, Julian Sarmiento, he's a genius. He's the VFX supervisor for the Marvel movies, for DC, for all these big directors. And we've developed a system where we can put a cartoon in frame with a human being live to air with no post-production, and they can talk to each other. So it looks like Roger Rabbit, but it doesn't take 6 years to make. It takes 5 seconds to make. So that is the best because it combines my hosting chops as Mark inside a cartoon character, and you can be a lot more audacious and weird as a cartoon than you can as a human being. So I really enjoy doing that. That's super fun. And I think animation just in general is exploding. So I've written a movie. We've got a couple TV shows that we're developing, and it seems with people's interest in AR and VR and animation, it seems to be kind of the right time to be doing all that. I just all the development and all the prep, I hate all that stuff. I just want to do funny shows. There are some people that have a very focused career and just do the hell out of one thing. I'm kind of okay at a bunch of different things. And I've always just kind of followed, like Joseph Campbell, I follow my bliss and I do stuff that I enjoy. And, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. You audition 1 billion times and you book one job, but that's the way the business works. So as long as you're enjoying your life, that's how I measure it. If your life is miserable, it doesn't matter how much money you make. And if your life is great, it doesn't matter, right?
Right.
We're all going to be dead in 100 years, so it doesn't matter. You might as well enjoy your time while you have it.
Yeah. I knowing you over the years, I could see you also playing a serious role, a drama.
Oh, I've done it. Yeah,
I know you've done it, but I'm talking about, you're older now and you're kind of going into a new realm, and
yes,
there's work. No, but there's work there for that,
There is.
Yeah.
There is. I actually at UCLA, I did a heavy duty drama that won all these national awards, and I won this big acting award for the drama. But it was like a miserable experience because for the 3 months that I was doing the play, it was a 3-hour play, and it was basically like a one-man show. So it was a lot of stuff to keep in my head, and it was just heavy, and it colored my daily life.
Right.
It was just like a heavy time. And when you're doing comedy, it's just the opposite. But acting, you know what? Acting it's all the same. You got to get inside somebody else's skin and then behave naturally for whoever that guy is, right? If you're playing Jeffrey Dahmer, it's natural to eat people. And you have to find, I think the great actors find a way to connect to whoever they're supposed to be playing. I heard your show with Joe Mantegna. I don't think he gets the credit he deserves for being such a impeccable actor. I mean, he's Fat Tony, and he's he's the guy digging up clues for the dead people.
Yeah.
It's he's got and he's a musician too, as well,
Yeah.
as you know. That's the fun part, is really connecting with like when you're acting with someone and you're somebody else and you can look in their eyes and you see that there's somebody else. It's like playing pickleball. You get into a groove.
Yeah. No doubt. And speaking of Joe, I mean, back then you start off in the theater and then you make your way in the film. That kind of path isn't the same anymore. You know what I mean? That's where you really get to hone your craft. And you did the same thing. You're always honing it and moving forward. It's like you said, it's just a different landscape today. And
yeah, I think digital is the new theater for most kids coming up.
Yeah.
Especially in comedy, right? Because you put up a video, one of them gets 1 million hits, one of them gets 100 hits. Now you know to do more of this and less of that. And it's immediate feedback. Personally, I always like doing comedy in front of a crowd, because you know right away if it's funny or not.
Right. Yeah. And I got to thank you for pushing me in this direction to do the podcast, because we were thinking, oh, what's next? What can we do? Because I kind of want to go back to my roots. We talked about, me and you talked about, maybe there might be a show out there a baseball show, and then you're like, you should do a podcast, and that pushed me over the top. I'm like, all right, we're gonna do it.
And they're good. Your podcasts are good.
Thank you, man. Appreciate that coming from you. Thank you.
This one we'll see, but the ones I've heard so far.
Come on. Hey, how often you get back to Chicago? I know you had a show out there, right?
Yeah, I was on Windy City Live for a decade, so I was back there every month or so, which I loved. The show got canceled in September, and we're going. My friend Booch's kid is getting married in August, so we're going back for a wedding. And I'll probably maybe once or twice a summer. I like to go there. I'm doing a charity hockey game in Minnesota the weekend after 4th of July, so I may swing by and spend a couple days in Chicago then too. I don't know.
Nice, man. Well,
when was the last time you got there?
God, it's before COVID.
Really?
Yeah. I haven't been there in a while. Yeah. Usually, hasn't really been like a reason to go back. I mean, we're out here trying, plugging away. It's not easy to get there. But it's been a while. Haven't been to Wrigley in a long time. So sometime soon, hopefully. I don't know. Yeah. But that's it, man. Jeez.
Well, it would be fun to go to Wrigley with you.
Well, hey, that would be a lot of fun, man. That would be a lot of fun. We got to do that sometime. Speaking of Wrigley, when did you I never really asked you this. When did you meet my dad? Did you ever personally have one-on-one talks with him?
I did. First of all, I've told you this before, but he was my favorite Cub growing up by far, right? Italian, third base. I played third base.
Right.
I just liked his vibe.
Yeah.
And then when he started doing radio with Pat Hughes, holy Christ, it was some of the best entertainment ever. The teams were horrible, but the way those two guys played off each other. I think Pat Hughes is a brilliant broadcaster, and he would just mess with your dad all day long, and your dad would give it right back to him. And it was the Pat and Ron show is what we called it, my brothers and I. We would watch the game on TV and queue up
that's
a radio playback so that we could listen to those guys instead of the TV guys. It was just he was my favorite Cub. What can I tell you? So I go to Randy Huntley's camp, and your dad was there, and I made a beeline for him at lunch on the first day and introduced myself, and hoping he'd recognize me from TV. He did not, and I just said, tell me some stories. Tell me what it was like. I remember following you guys, and he told me a really funny story about when the guys hid the ticking time bomb box in his locker, and he went and threw it over the stands. It sounds like they picked on him because he was so intense. And he just told me some hilarious, funny stories. And he was
Yeah,
He was exactly like you think he would be.
You know, it's funny because my dad was an intense guy. There's no doubt about it. Wore his heart on his sleeve. And the broadcasting, he was nervous when he first did that, man. And it wasn't until Pat really came along. He got better after a couple of years because he had a 3-man booth with Brenly and Brenneman and him. And then Pat Hughes came along, and that's when he became himself. You know, they just made it's kind of like him and Beckert. My dad always works great with someone who's different than him. I mean, completely like Beckert. Beckert was cheap. My dad wasn't cheap, right? Beckert would have these one-liners. My dad be more like, okay, let's get into a conversation. And they just worked, right? Beckert never got hurt by my dad's intensity. Some players might have. He was very emotional. So when he got serious, sometimes it rubbed people the wrong way. But not for Beckert. Never did. Yeah. And that's why it was so, I mean, he became like an uncle to us. They always hung around. They had such a great friendship. So it's like he just works good with someone who completely can take the other end of him, and he can. Well,
and Pat has great ears. He found comedy in, you're doing a live broadcast 3 hours a day. It can't just be baseball. It can't just be the game, rather. It's got to be the bigger umbrella of baseball. No doubt. And I think Pat approaches his broadcasts as entertainment about baseball as opposed to, I'm going to call a baseball game. And he knew how to push your dad's buttons. And it's like everyone in the world hears Pat pushing the buttons except your dad. And then your dad would get all jacked up about something, and you could almost picture Pat just giggling in the corner. But they were a great comedy team, like Abbott and Costello, the Marx Brothers. Everybody was different, but they all fit together, and it was just it was an enjoyable thing to listen to. One of the sadnesses of my life is that he didn't live to see Cooperstown. But I remember watching the game when they retired his number at Wrigley Field, and that was his Cooperstown.
It
seemed like he really
did
appreciated it, which I loved.
That's when I was filming This Old Cub during that time, right? Mm-hmm. And talk about you got a story you're working on. You're like, what's our ending, right? And then they announced that, and it's like, wow, right? It's just. But to be there for all that and to see my dad come back from what he came back from, I mean, really just inspired me being his son, because
obviously not enough to play softball with your shot legs, but it inspired you to a certain degree, I think you should say, to a certain degree.
Yeah, to a certain degree. Okay. Yeah. Like my softball.
I'll tell you though, one of the great scenes in This Old Cub is the scene where you're at the bottom of the stairs, that huge staircase. And you offer to help him up the stairs, and he's like, no, I got it. And then the camera just stays on him as he works his way up the stairs. And it just gives you such an insight into his mentality and his tenacity and his, life is not going to get me. I'm going to get life.
Yeah.
And always with a smile on his face and, a hairpiece on his head.
And he got Joe Pepitone turned him on to the hairpiece, that. And back in like 71 or 2, my dad was starting to lose his hair. So and Pepitone wore a full one, right? I mean, that thing was,
and he had like a big hair off the back of his head.
Yeah, and the whole thing was he wouldn't go out for, at the beginning, he wouldn't go out for the national anthem because he didn't want to take his hat off, right? Peppy was something though, man. Yeah, my dad and the hairpiece was funny. But he was just one of those kind of guys though, like, people say like, hey, how come he didn't follow his footsteps? I'm like, you got to listen. We came up from, he grew up way different than my brother and I grew up, right? And that's a big thing mentally. It's like, he grew up with not much, dad left him early, and baseball became his thing. And I always think about what would he do if he didn't play baseball. I was talking to Joey Banks about that. What would our fathers have done if they didn't play baseball, And you just go, no, they were just meant to be. It was like, because today it's like you see all the guys, they on travel leagues and all this. My dad played baseball, I also played football, I also played basketball. He was a city boy, right? So a city boy, and he lived right down the street from a minor league ballpark, which was a block away. And so he got a job there like when he was 9 years old. So he was always in the culture of baseball, but at the same time, it wasn't his life, right? It was like he had to live his life being a city kid without a father, So it's kind of that strength that you really take mentally. When it comes down to it, the real great ones have that mental edge that when they cross those white lines, man, it's game on. I mean, it's for a rock star. It's for, man, it's game on.
Any performance-based career, you have to, I think you need both. You need God-given or born with talent and tenacity. You see it in Little League and high school and college, see a lot of kids with talent, but they don't make it to the bigs because they're lazy or they're not tenacious or they don't work hard or you need both, right?
Yeah.
Because when you're 12, if you just have talent, you'll be great because no one else is playing hard, right? You can skate by on just innate talent for a certain period of time. But once all the other losers filter out and it's everybody with innate talent, you still have to go to that next level. And that's mental toughness, that's focus, that's, game psychology, all that kind of stuff. My nephew Sam is playing. He's the starting freshman for the University of Washington baseball team as a freshman. And I don't know where he gets it, but in pressure situations, he's clutch. Other kids, the pressure gets to them, And I think you have to realize any pressure situation, first of all, it's pressure on everybody. And every walk-off home run is preceded by your team being down and needing a hit. So every time you step into a pressure situation, welcome it because it's an opportunity to do something big, right? If your team is up by 12 runs and you hit a 3-run home run, great. It's good. But it's different if you're down by 2 and you hit a granny.
Right.
So you can't attain that greatness without facing the adversity right before it. And that goes for show business too, when you're standing there and they're about to call action and do you know your lines and who you're supposed to move, all that has to disappear. And when the light goes on, you got to deliver and be whoever you're supposed to be seamlessly, smoothly, and make it happen. And I think the people that flower up and open up to those pressure situations are the ones that succeed. Obviously, your dad was a big clutch hitter.
Yeah, big clutch hitter.
Right?
And you did that for 500 shows at Studs. I mean, that's
580, but who's counting?
How many?
580. Don't short shift me the 80. Yeah, and I learned that on stage, doing improv on stage. You walk on stage and you have literally no idea what you're going to say for the next 45 minutes, but you do. And that you have to, if you can embrace that, I don't even know what the right word is, that unfamiliar, that abyss of nothingness before you, and enjoy jumping into it. I think that's what it takes to succeed in performance careers like sports or entertainment or whatever.
Yeah.
Being a lawyer.
I was talking to Joey Malfitano and he was talking about pressure. It's like, he said, he was talking, I don't know what golfer it was, a famous golfer, and he's a friend of his. And he said, did you get nervous going up that last hole? He said, was the pressure on you? He goes, pressure? No pressure with me. It's pressure. If you think of pressure, then you're not experienced to be in that position, and that's basically it. It's all your experience, everything you've gone through in life that brought you to that moment, now.
Right. You're there. You're there because you worked hard. Enjoy it.
Absolutely. And that's what I think sometimes is missing in a lot of people today is that buildup to because I feel like my dad had that buildup his whole life. I mean, the pressure was around every corner, I think, and I feel it like I wish I had my mental kind of way of approaching things when I played, but as I do now, because the pressure came when I started to feel the heat, in my life, like where you're going in life, then you start to build, oh, I see what my dad was talking about. I wish he explained it to me, but that's because that is it. It's like, how do you explain that? I was talking to Joey Banks about, did Ernie ever help you, in baseball? Because Joey played minor league ball. He was a good ball player. And he's like, well, not really. He'd kind of sit in his car and he'd tell me a couple of things. That was my dad. My dad would always, don't dip the shoulder. I'm like, dip the shoulder? But yeah, But I think at the end of the day, they knew that they were at such a high level that I'm not going to put this kind of pressure on these kids. We've been around baseball our whole life, so we picked it up. But I do think though, when I talked to Todd Hundley, Randy went to Todd, and this is it. It's like, you can get it from your father if there's a way that I just think my dad and Ernie were just separate. It was almost like, it wasn't like he put any pressure on me or said, do it this way, or he let us have fun. And at the end of the day, maybe he knew that we weren't going to get there too, right? It's like, maybe that's it.
Well, and I also think there's extra pressure.
Yeah.
You walk on a field with Santo on the back of your shirt, or Joey walks on with Banks.
Yeah.
Immediately, some guys are going to love you because of who your father is. Some guys are going to hate you and think, oh, he's only here because of his father. And that's, most ball players don't have to deal with that crap. So I would imagine the first thing you guys had to deal with is just like getting rid of that and just playing whoever you are. Right.
Yep. That was more
it's hard.
Yeah. That was more for, I think, Ron Jr. He was Ron Jr. So it actually affected my brother more than me as in high school, but it got to me in college. But in high school, I was more, I would go to parties that my brother's 2 years older and he just graduated, and it'd be like, yeah, I struck out your brother. If all these guys struck at my brother, well, he struck out a hell of a, he did, right? They're just saying that kind of crap. And I feel like, going back to like Todd Hundley, I remember him telling me, he goes, my dad asked me, do I want to play this game? Randy said to him, and he said, yeah, I do. And he said, all right, then I'm going to show you how to play it. And mentally, he put Todd down in the backyard on his knees, his hands tied behind his back, and just started firing baseballs in the dirt at him, right?
Right.
And boom, became a great catcher that way. And it's just kind of like, how far are you going to go to get to that greatness? Because greatness is a lot of work, man. And you know that. It's just a lot of work and a lot of time.
It is. And you have to, going back to what we said earlier, you have to enjoy the entire process, right? You have to enjoy the work, practice how you play. You have to enjoy what people call pressure and welcome it and seek it out to be great or to succeed. Just making it to the major leagues means you're great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
You're how many hundreds, millions of kids play baseball every year, and there's 30 teams with 26 guys on them. That's not a lot of people that actually make it through the eye of the needle. So you got to have something to make it in the first place. And then you have to stay there, and it's tough. Yeah.
Staying there is the tough part, maintaining.
But, and I think it's everybody in their life, regardless of their career, it's the same basic shape, right? I think the hardest thing in life is figuring out what you want to go be good at.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
You have to enjoy it. What's the saying? If you enjoy your job, you never work a day in your life. Yeah. And that's how I feel. I like the work is the auditions and it's the learning lines, but the actual doing the gigs, we do that for free.
Yep.
That's,
no doubt, man.
That's the fun part.
Yep. And you're really good at it, man. And I could see you doing it like a debate show too, man. I like to see you in there and just
I would love that. Yeah.
Mix it up with people. Yeah. Especially today, man. Oh man. That would be great to see. Oh, yeah. Buddy. Thanks so much for coming on. Please give our love.
See, when you call me, I show up. That's all I'm saying.
Now again, don't call me 2 hours before game time.
I should have recorded that phone call and play it back right now. That's what I should have done. But I did it because we're friends, Jeff.
Like I said, you need me out here in Burbank. I'm ready for you, buddy.
All right.
I'm not going across the hill to that stand lot.
Wow. That's the depth of our friendship, folks.
Oh, come on.
It's got like a 5-mile
you that
geocentric fence around it.
Oh, buddy, man. All right. Love you, pal. I'll talk to you back. Soon. Let's see each other soon.
Yes. I want to play pickleball with you and Christy.
Let's do it. Awesome, man.
All right.
Thanks for coming on, Mark.
Thanks, Jeff. This is a really great show. I'm really honored and happy to have been on it. And I hope to see you in real life soon.
Absolutely. Right on, brother. Thanks so much, pal.
Right.
See you, buddy.
That moment was brought to you by Tangent West, Executive Recruiters. Headquartered in Denver, with offices in Vail, Colorado, and New Orleans. Since 1995,
Tangent West has conducted executive searches nationally and internationally. They place C-level executives, management positions, high-level executive assistants, marketing and accounting, and finance. Cheryl Grimaldi, president, has personally interviewed over 36,000 candidates and has filled over 2,500 searches. I've known Cheryl for decades. She's a dear family friend and someone you can trust. She's been at this for a long time. Tangent West, hunting human excellence and building the country's finest company since 1995, because nothing matters more than hiring the right people. If you're hiring, go to www.tangentwest.com.
Crackerjack.
Yeah, Jeff.
This call is being recorded.
Carmen Fanzone,
Good morning.
how are you, man?
Good, Jeff. How are you?
Good. You're my crackerjack call for our podcast. so glad to have you on, man.
My pleasure.
Hey, your career was a fascinating one when you really take a close look at it. You were signed in 1964 by the Boston Red Sox out of Central Michigan, right?
Right.
And you played 8 years in the minors when your hitting was phenomenal, man. Like your first year, you hit .358, 26 home runs, 90 runs batted in, with a .446 on base percentage. That's amazing. Did it ever feel like, was there a reason why, and you did that consistently throughout, your on base percentage? I mean, you literally had my dad's type numbers as far as on base percentage, home runs, RBIs. You're in the 90s, 80s. Your on base percentage, .474 one year, .442, .446. I mean, in the Moneyball era here, they would look at you and say, "Get him up to the bigs." What do you think the reason was?
Well, they thought enough of me to keep me around, but they didn't think enough of me to get me to the big league camp. You know, like my first big league camp was with the Cubs in 1972, and I had signed in '64. So,
Wow.
It's just circumstances. You know, I was never. We used to kid about being suspects and prospects, and I was never a prospect from the beginning. We were just like, there were a bunch of us that just made the sides even. You know, but we were an integral part of all the teams we played on, but and it's just the way they looked at me, you know. But thank God they kept me around for all those years, and I loved it. You know, it was it got me an opportunity, and without hanging around for 8 years in the minor leagues, I would have never got a chance to play in the big leagues.
Yeah, man. It's and you to have that patience too, that says so much about you, Carmen. I mean, and do you think, like, was there someone in front of you? Did you play third base all the time? What was your position, your constant position? Third base?
Well, I signed as a third baseman. You know, I played shortstop my whole as a youngster and in college and stuff, and but third base was my primary position. Even when I got brought up to the big leagues with Boston in 1970, George Scout was the third baseman. He was playing third before they moved him to first. And the day that I got there, I wasn't eligible to go on the roster for a day or two. And the day I got there, he broke his wrist or something. He got hurt, and I'm thinking, this is the way it's supposed to be. You know, this is the way the script is supposed to be written. But they just gave me a couple opportunities. But then John, I can forget his name, John Kennedy, they gave him most of the playing time. It just when I went up to Boston, everything that could go wrong went wrong, and so it was just I was just glad for that part of my career to be over with. And when I got to the Cubs, of course, everything changed.
Right.
Even though I was playing behind your dad, but it was just a different atmosphere altogether.
Yeah, man. You know, did you ever feel like, I mean, just looking at your numbers, and I mean, you were a guy that had a good eye, obviously, because you walked a hell of a lot of times. and you struck out about this, less than your walks, which today you never see, right? You don't see those on base percentages today. These guys are striking out way more than they're walking. But you had all the essentials as a hitter. You had power. You had a good average. I mean, boy, man, it just seems really unfair, like the numbers you were putting up and not to get that shot in Boston. It wasn't like they had a guy like my dad at third, right?
Right, for sure.
Yeah, but I mean, and then you get to Chicago. What was that like when you finally got called up after, 7 years?
Well, everything changed, of course, because at the end of the 71 season in Tacoma, I knew that I was getting called up to the Cubs, and I had a couple of days before I was eligible, and I had asked Blake Cullen at that point, can I go back to Detroit, get my car, and drive to Chicago? And he said, sure, that'd be fine. And then the day that I'm supposed to fly out of Chicago to meet the team in Pittsburgh, I'm driving and I got lost going to the airport. And it was like, I had a 67 Chevy and it was about 100 degrees and I was sweating. And anyway, I ended up missing my flight. I was changing my clothes in the car. And so I missed my flight and I called Blake Cullen and I said, Blake, I missed my flight. Should I just wait here and because the team was coming back to Chicago that night? And he said, no, Santo's not feeling good. Leo may need you. Just take the next flight. Get here as soon as you can. So I took the next flight. I didn't get to Pittsburgh till 8 o'clock. The game started at 8 o'clock. By the time I got a cab and got to the clubhouse and got a uniform given to me, it was like about the fourth inning. So it had been such an awful day that I just sat there and watched the game, and we were getting beat about 8 or 9-0. Pappas is pitching, and we're playing. We're facing Steve Blass, who that year the Pirates won the World Series, and he won 2 games in the series. So about I think the 9th inning, Leo looks down the bench and he doesn't even know who I am. He says, "Hey, you grab a bat." So I go pinch hit for Pappas. First pitch is a strike. I take it. The next pitch is I hit a fly ball to left field, and as I'm running to first base, I'm thinking, well, at least I didn't embarrass myself. So I round first base, and then the ball goes over the fence. So I've hit a home run on my first at bat.
Holy cow, man!
And of course, when you're getting beat 8 or 9-0, you can't really jump up and down, in the big leagues or anywhere. You just so I get to home plate, and Kessinger is there, and he knows what I had done, and I know what I had done. And everybody in the bench knew what I had done, but I really couldn't celebrate. So after the game, we get on the bus, and we're going to the airport. And they had called up a couple other guys from AAA, so there weren't enough seats in the bus. And there were one seat left, and Pepitone and I were both standing. And, of course, he's ranting and raving. This is the big leagues. You should have got a bigger bus. And, of course, I couldn't say anything. But there was one seat left next to Leo. So at that point, Leo says, "Carmen, come sit by me." Nobody sat by the manager. Right. So I sat next to him, and he says, "We got to get you in the lineup. Can you play somewhere else?" And I said, "Yeah, I can play some first base and a little second base." And so we get back to Chicago, and the Cardinals are coming to town. We had an off day the next day. So I get to Jerry Royce is pitching the first game, and I get to start against him. And let me see, Steve, the Hall of Famer, Steve Carlton is the next day, and I get to play against him. And then I think on Sunday they pitched the right-hander, and he didn't start me. So for the next month, it was hit or miss. I was his boy for 2 days. But
that's an amazing story, man. All those years, and then you get up there and you hit a home run. God, man. I have to tell you this. My mom told me this, and I just asked her again yesterday because I told her I was calling you. She said to say hello. Such a nice guy, and she said when you came up, and my dad got hurt, didn't he? Something was happening with him then and you played for a while.
He got Steve Durker, Larry Durker hit him and broke his wrist.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I got to play for like about 5 or 6 weeks. I started in your dad's place. And
wow.
I remember I was doing pretty good at that point. And I remember your dad telling me, my wife is sticking pins in the dolls because she doesn't want you to do well.
I think it was the opposite, because my mom said, yeah, your dad was nervous. Carmen was going to take his spot. You know, I said, well, what'd you say to him, Mom? He said, what am I going to say to him? That's how your dad got at times, you know. And that's funny, man, because, you know, back then you got 1-year contracts, right? So those guys, even the starters, you just don't know, right? You're like, hey, you know, someone comes in there and plays well.
Well, you never know, but you know, the guys, you said your dad was making big money, and I'm sure that they weren't going to just put him on the bench, you know. So it's just there's a lot of that going on too. But it was kind of funny, you know. That was my most happiest time, and it just seemed like I was getting some key hits and playing well at that point. But of course, then when your dad came back, I got to play first base for a couple of days, and then after that, it was very sparingly again.
Oh, man. I mean, and you had that, you know, you had a stance where you kind of were on the knob of the bat. You held that bat down at the bottom, so you had some good whip in the bat. And, you know, my dad probably looked at your stats in the minors that year with the Cubs. You hit 28 home runs, 106 RBIs, and 327. He's going, oh, this kid's good, right? So
your dad and I used to banter back and forth all the time, you know, because the fact that he didn't spend any time in the minors, and I spent about 8 years, and he said, if you're good enough, you play in the big leagues. And if you're not, I'd say there's a lot of guys in the minors that deserve a chance to play in the big leagues, but they just never get a shot. You know, so we'd banter back and forth all the time about that.
In a joking way, obviously, right? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. How was my dad when you got to the club? Were you kind of on your own, or did these guys embrace you right away? How'd that feel?
Well, it's I felt, you know, they kind of embraced me. I didn't feel any animosity and stuff, and it's really funny. The regulars, they really go their own way, and the extra guys, you know, they kind of hang out together, you know. So it's
right.
In the minors, you know, after the game, everybody goes out and has something to eat together. In the majors, everybody goes their separate ways. So you never see the regulars, you know, after the game, and you don't really hang with them that much. And at home, of course, they have houses in Chicago, and I was living in a one-room thing. I don't remember where I was living, but yeah, it's a little different, you know. There's so much more camaraderie in the minor leagues.
Right, and well, they do stay in. I remember the guys always kind of stay after and have a beer. At least my dad did a lot in the clubhouse when we would go with them.
Oh yeah, for sure.
You know, and I do remember you came to our house one time. I remember you with your comb, your mustache comb, and the trumpet, and yeah, we all gravitated around you. You're like, this guy's cool, man.
Yeah, I do remember coming out there once, right?
Right.
I think your dad invited me for dinner. That might have been it. Yeah.
Okay. God, man, you are an anomaly though, man. With the career you had in the minors, and the stuff that you went back and forth with my dad, you were one of those guys that got overlooked. No doubt about that, Carmen. I mean, I checked out all your stats, and wow. And now though, after baseball, you finished in 74, and did you play another year in 75 somewhere?
75, I signed with Hawaii. I called all the big league clubs after I got released by the Cubs in 74, you know, asking for a job, and I couldn't get any. I got 24. I think it was 24 clubs at that point, and nobody would give me a shout out at all. So, and I got a chance to go to Hawaii to play, and even Japan there was some interest, but I thought I would like to play, and maybe even go back to the minors, and maybe get off to a decent start and get back to the big leagues, because I missed the pension by 85 days.
Yeah, that's another thing that's tough. Yeah.
Yeah. So when I got to Hawaii, and then in the first month, I broke my ankle playing there, and that turned out to be the end of my career. You know, but I was hoping that I could do something there, and maybe somebody would bring me back, but it never happened.
Wow, man. Was that your dream, though, to be a baseball player, like in your youth?
Oh yeah, everybody that I grew up with, everybody wanted to be a big league ball player, and I was fortunate enough to live out my dream. It took a little longer, but that's. But I always had my trumpet too, so I was either playing the horn or I was playing ball, But everybody had a dream of being in the big league, so it was. I was able to live out my dream. So even though I wish it would have been longer than it was, I was still able. I was there, and I have wonderful memories.
Yeah, no doubt, man. And let's talk about the pension and why that didn't happen. Because if you look at your career, I mean, you had 10 years with the minors. You're 11 years in Major League Baseball, and you don't get 12, a pension because
12 altogether, but
12 altogether
in the big leagues. And when I did get released by the Cubs, Jim Marshall had just been named manager of the club. And I played for Jim Marshall in AAA, and I had a good year with him, and we won the Pacific Coast League title. And I used to spend time with his kids, and I was the first one to get released, and I couldn't believe that Jim Marshall. You hope for when somebody gets in a position of power that you have somebody that in your corner. We used to talk about having a godfather, to look out for you. I never had that godfather with Boston because I signed for $25. After I signed, they gave me $25 because I just bought a new Wilson 2000 glove. So they didn't have any investment in me. So that's why I was, I floundered for 8 years, but they thought enough of me to keep me around, but not enough to give me a shot in the big leagues. And
you probably think that had to do because they signed you for so cheap, right? I mean, not back then.
They didn't have an investment in me. They didn't.
Yep.
That's where the being a prospect and a suspect come in. If they have money invested in you, then they're going to look at every little thing you do. And
no doubt.
It was really funny. The spring of '68, we were in Ocala, Florida. I was, and Ted Williams was the minor league hitting coach with the Red Sox. So early on in spring training, I'm hitting in the cage, and he's standing behind me, and he says, "Have you always hit that way?" I said, "Yeah, kind of, basically." He said, "You're not getting your hands started. You're not moving your hands at all. You have to get them started and get something going." And amazingly, in the next couple of swings, the ball was jumping off my bat. It was going everywhere. So for the next week, he watched every move I made. It was like I was a prospect for a week. Wow. I was taking ground balls at first base, and he was hitting ground balls to me and giving me encouragement. And just for a week, it was just it was so much fun. And then I ended up being the player of the year in the Eastern League that year, and I'm sure that had a lot to do with it. Just the fact that he paid attention to me. And it was kind of funny that he and I shared the same birthday, August 30th.
Holy cow.
But he was quite a guy. When he talked, it was as if like God was speaking. Whether it was about hitting or pitching or anything, he thought so much about baseball, and he was
no doubt, man. And to get that kind of attention from one of the greatest hitters of all time, some say he is the greatest hitter of all time.
Exactly.
Do you think,
right.
Carmen? Yeah. Do you feel like if you got your chance in the bigs? I mean, I'm looking at your stats all the way through. Do you think that you could have been a consistent, guy throughout?
Well,
if you got that?
in the right situation, even with in spring training of 60s, 70s, 73 or 74. It could have been 72 or 73. We were playing a spring training game in Yuma against San Diego, and I was having a pretty good spring. And the scuttlebutt was that I was supposed to get traded to the Padres. So we go down to Yuma to play, and it had to be 72 because Leo was still the manager.
Right.
So it was 72. We go to Yuma, and we're playing San Diego in about the 8th or 9th inning. I pinch hit against Al Severinsen. And Al Severinsen was a relief pitcher. That was the scuttlebutt was I was supposed to get traded for Al Severinsen. So
Wow.
as you know, I hit a home run off of Al Severinsen. so the trade is off. So what if I do get traded to San Diego? They're an expansion club. Maybe I get a chance to play third base. Maybe I get a chance to play a couple of years. You just never know. All these ifs and buts, but it never happened. And I was happy because I love Chicago, and even though I played behind your dad, it's there might have been a better opportunity for me in San Diego, but that's hindsight. You just never know.
God, man, it's almost kind of like the universe was it just didn't make any sense. Thank God you played the trumpet, right? Because where do you blow off all that steam of unfairness?
Exactly.
Oh,
it's kind
God.
of the first time we go to Pittsburgh, after I hit the pinch hit home run, the next trip in we go, and Pittsburgh was a pretty good music town, and there was a jazz club there, Walt Harper's Attic, and all the guys would come over there and would have a couple of beers, and they had a jazz group, and I got to sit in with the group. So I remember the guy. I remember the announcer. He called me Carmen Fanzone. Yeah.
Oh man.
And of course, everybody got a kick out of it, but that's just. Yeah.
Wow, man. And you wore 23. For people who don't know you, you wore Rhino's number before Rhino, took that number on. But Carmen, as a kid, I always remembered you, man. Me and Ronnie, you were just a cool cat all the time. And your trumpet. Talk about like when you. How long have you been married to Sue?
Well, we've been married 37 years, and we've been together about 42.
Oh, that's great, man. And talk about that, man. You did go on to have a career in music. You're in the musicians union, and Sue, had 4 Grammy nominees as a jazz singer. So you guys have had a nice life out here in Los Angeles, right? After your baseball career.
For sure. Yeah, I when I played my last year in Hawaii, I met a couple of trumpet players there that had been through the LA scene. So they kind of convinced me to come here because I knew that I either wanted to go to New York or LA just to test the waters to see if I could compete musically, And so that's why I came to LA. And I was never able to really work a lot as a musician to support myself. But, of course, I met Sue, which was great. And I started working for the Musicians Union, and I spent 29 years there. So it's been okay. It's worked out okay.
Right. Well, you guys have a great relationship, and love to see that. I feel the same with my wife. We're going on 15. Obviously, got a ways to go where you guys are at, but you guys are. I saw you like a couple years ago over at on Olive, that hotel bar that we would go with our softball team, and you and Sue were in there. It was great to see you guys then. And so, and let's talk about when speaking of playing, filling in and playing your trumpet. I want to talk about a night at Randy Huntley's Fantasy Camp where I took a ride with you and Eddie Vedder to Remington's in Scottsdale.
Right.
And talk about that. I mean, it's just crazy, mind-blowing night where your friend, the musician you were playing with, knew Eddie's father. Right.
Well, Danny Long was the piano player. And I never met Danny when we were in Chicago, but he was a mainstay in Chicago and clubs and stuff. And then he moved to Arizona, and he played at this club, Remington's in Scottsdale, for about 20 years or longer. And every time I do it, and I did about 30 years of Randy's camps. So every year I would go there, and of course every night I would go and play with Danny Long, and Judy Roberts would play a lot of the times also. And I knew her from Chicago. So then we got talking, and Eddie Vedder did a couple of the camps.
Right.
And him being a musician, he came down one night with his cronies and introduced them to to Danny Long, and as it turned out, Danny Long roomed with his dad in Chicago. And unbeknownst to Eddie Vedder, he didn't know that. So they got talking and how that all began. And then there was another friend of mine that used to date Eddie Vedder's dad in Chicago, and she was involved in that too. So it's and that's how that all got together. And then Eddie doing that number about his dad, you know.
Man.
Yeah, somebody sent that out, but it was.
On his Earthling album that came out last year, he was talking. He had to sit down with Bruce Springsteen talking about you and the camp and how that went down, and just amazing the pathway through Randy's camp and you to make that happen. And then he did get a track from his dad that he put on Earthling album called On My Way, where his dad sings and Eddie accompanies it, and it's amazing. It's just chilling. And that came through you, Carmen. That's amazing, man. Just amazing how life can work, the pathways in the camp, and Eddie being a Cubs fan, and that had to feel good. How you made that connection, huh?
Well, yeah, it was happenstance. You don't know, but it made everybody happy, and of course Eddie Vedder, he's a big star, you know, and the fact that Danny Long knew his dad was amazing enough in itself.
It really was, man, and Eddie's such a good guy, and I just, when he was talking to Bruce Springsteen about it, you could just feel like what all that meant, and you being the key guy on that is just amazing, Carmen.
Yeah, it was very nice that he mentioned me, so it was that was special.
Yeah, I mean, and those camps are special too, right? What do you think of Randy's camps all those years being out there?
Oh, I enjoyed it. I really loved it. It's really a pecking order, you know. And I was always the one with the least amount of big league time. So it's and everybody falls in place, you know. And if there's a Hall of Famer there, then he's always holding court. And then if there's not a Hall of Famer, then the guy that's played 20 years is holding court. You know, right. I'm always just waiting to go play my horn at night, but it was still fun. It was still fun, and I got a chance to bring my glove out of cobwebs once a year, and
exactly, man.
I never wanted to embarrass myself, baseball wise. So that was my biggest fear.
Oh man, all those Cub fans knew who you were, though, Carmen. Your name, everything. You stuck out. You and Paul Popovich. I remember the utility guys. You two guys really stuck out. And plus you playing the trumpet. Everyone remembers that, man.
Right.
So how are you doing today, Carmen?
Well, I'm dealing with some health issues, but I'm okay.
Okay.
For about the last 4 or 5 years, I've got congestive heart failure and a bunch of other things, and I'm taking a lot of medication. I'm still upright. I ran for 50 years every day, and now I can't run anymore, so I walk. And I'm still able to hit the tennis ball 3 or 4 times a week, and at a little slower speed than I used to play, but I'm still able to go out, and I do as much as I can, and I'm just everything's okay. Everything's okay.
Oh, well, that's good. That's good to hear, man. And I was talking to Joey Banks. He said you were something else on the tennis court too. He said you wanted to get on Carmen's team for everything, basically, if you wanted to win. That's awesome. So good talking to Carmen. Thanks so much for talking with me, man.
Jeff, pleasure. Yeah, my pleasure.
It's so cool, man. And I'd love to get some breakfast. We've talked about this at the Corral Cafe with you and Sue and me and Christy. Let me know what's good for you in the next month, man. We'll meet you over there for breakfast.
That'd be great. Yeah, we go there about once a week, and you say you live just a couple of blocks away. And
yeah.
And we've been going there for years, so that would be great, Jeff.
Let's do that. Let's make that happen for sure. Thanks again, Carmen. I'll talk to you soon, pal. All right.
Jeff,
see you later.
Thanks, Jeff. Okay, bye-bye.
You got it, man. Okay, see you, bud.
Bye-bye.
Hope you enjoyed that as much as we did.
And remember, don't hesitate to write. Tell me a story about my dad, or tell us how you're liking the show. Email jeff.ppcpodcast@gmail.com.
And click subscribe if you're on Apple Podcasts. Or if you want to be a cool crackerjack, subscribe on our Patreon page by clicking the link below this episode. Or go to our website, www.peanutspopcornandcrackerjacks.com.
We got exclusive content that you'll really love listening to. We work hard to get it, and we so greatly appreciate any support that you could give our show.
It means a lot.
That's our show. Special thanks to our cool crackerjacks, Scott Nelson, Jim McCauley, Debbie Foley, Sherry Matarisi, and Terry Rankin Gurovitz.
You guys are the coolest. We're only a few away from a full team. How about that?
How about that? My closing quote: if you're not practicing, somebody else is somewhere, and he'll be ready to take your job. Brooks Robinson.
Toodaloo.
SantoFilms.com, the place to buy This Old Cub DVDs, posters, and This Old Cub t-shirts. Get yourself one now at SantoFilms.com.